Read that whole bio. She saw the look. You know, when you've been a teacher or a parent, you have a look, right? And the kids know when they're getting that look. So this is a beautiful group. This group comes closer to being a proportionate representation of the children of California than most groups that I sit with. And that's a beautiful thing. So I would like to start by acknowledging the amazing heavy lifting that you've all been doing as teachers, counselors, coordinators, principals, district office folks, parents, youth leaders, community leaders. Because you believe, and I know that this is true, you believe what we believe at the San Francisco Foundation, and that is that to school every day, safe and free from hunger, pain, and fear, having slept in a comfortable, nurturing environment, arriving ready to learn, and ready to have her imagination, creativity opened up by the teacher in a school that's ready for her. And that that child has a right to learn at grade level, every grade, and be challenged with trust, with responsibility, with accountability, so that she or he can graduate high school ready for college, ready for a career, ready to serve the community. And you know, when we began to navigate the murky waters of the No Child Left Behind legislation, and we realized that the legislation was shining a bright spotlight on the achievement gap and on the learning disparities, we also began to realize that to address it completely was going to be once again implementing, for the most part, an unfunded mandate. And as we look at districts and schools that are struggling to meet their API goals and to meet their AYP, we have seen for the last over a decade now, a decade and a half, educators throwing up their hands saying, well, what do you expect us to do with these barriers to learning? What do you expect us to do with these kids? And by barriers, they're referring to poverty, hunger, poor health, poor housing, violence, unemployment, and the list goes on and on and on. But meanwhile, some of our friends, some of our research friends, like Linda Darling-Hammond down at Stanford, like Patricia Gandara at UCLA, like Manuel Pastor at USC, Norm Fruchter and Pedro Noguera at NYU, and even writers like Paul Tuff from the New York Times are at the same time talking about these sort of non-cognitive indicators that really become the elements that people are looking for, that are the determinants of student success in school and student success in life, the kinds of things that employers are looking for. So what are we talking about? We're talking about character. We're talking about grit. We're talking about resiliency. We're talking about coping skills. We're talking about the kinds of attributes that develop when a human being works his or her way up Maslow's their hierarchy of human development. Remember studying this in psychology, anthropology? So we start with the basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, and then we move up a little bit, you know, opportunity, we move up a little bit, you know, resiliency, responsibility, we move up a little bit to enlightenment. And so we keep reaching for this notion of enlightenment, particularly in reading and math scores. But the researchers are telling us, wait a minute, you forgot about Maslow. Go back and look, go back and look. In fact, last week in Ed Week, a gentleman by the name of David Connolly presented some of his newer research on what he's calling the non-cognitive indicators for student success. Persistence, coping skills, resilience, determination, empathy, kindness, as genuine predictors of school success. But you know, the youth development has been saying this for decades, right? But sometimes a system has to begin to fail before it's willing to change itself. But it wasn't always a failing system. So I'm going to take you on a little walk back through history. Some of you have heard this. Some of you are going to get to hear it. Some of you can complete my sentences on this. But economists like Alan Kruger in the White House, President Obama's chief economic advisor, talks about a time in American history when we came the closest to closing the achievement gap, the income gap, the employment gap, the housing gap, the gaps in health disparities, and this was a period of time between about 1960 and about 1975. So how was that? What was going on? Well, it was post-Sputnik. Remember Sputnik? That first spaceship that wasn't American, that caused America to have the quickest, most robust STEM program that this nation has ever seen, because we were going to compete with those commies. We had a civil rights movement that gave birth to bilingual education and affirmative action. We had the U.S. Department of Education was under what was called HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare, which de rigueur had a school nurse, a school social worker, and a school psychologist at every school, right? The Great Society, which was our national initiative, offered arts and culture and recreation and after-school programs and 2 terms of summer school that were not just remedial, that was enrichment. You could do swimming, you could do arts, you could study basket weaving in summer school. The War on Poverty, another federal initiative, did not treat low-wage earners or the unemployed as trash, as leeches, in the terms that the media has so easily used to disparage people who are hungry, out of work, and trying to feed their children. The minimum wage was truly a minimum wage, as it was created to be, established for the minimum income necessary for a person to work to support herself with food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. This wasn't socialism, my friends. This was the American way. And the education components were the full component parts of full-service community schools. We didn't call them that then because they were publicly funded in virtually every public school, but they were part of a grand-scale plan to create and sustain a middle class in this country. So what happened? Well, truthfully, and I know you want the truth, as the complexion of America's children got darker, and their ethnicities and languages became more diverse, the public will and the political will for these supports and services for all children practically vanished in favor of the most skewed public tax system we have seen since the 1920s. So today, public school leaders and districts and schools must rely on community leaders, nonprofits, foundations, special initiatives to fund the supports and services and opportunities that were once publicly funded and made our schools great. And that has been the new American way recently. And so what? Some people say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example. In the 1970s, America had the highest percentage of college graduates per capita in the world and a proportionate equitable tax system. Today, we rank number 17 in percentage of college graduates in this country with a tax system that favors the elite. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, and serious education reformers and researchers should be striving to recreate 21st century versions of what really addressed the whole child back in the era of this greatest American education. But we have to muster the public will and the political will to do it. And we're talking about, and I know you know this, we're talking about all kids. All. The kids that show up with the ugly tats on their neck. The kids that have metal piercings all over their face and hands. The kids that walk in with tobacco on their breath, with their boxers yanked up out of their pants, dropping F-bombs in the hallway. And we're talking about providers in this very room who are leading the way to say, hey, all does mean all. Regardless of the language, regardless of the background, regardless of the kind of food they ate for breakfast and the little smell is still on the breath. All means all. And that's why HTA, CSCI, many intermediaries here in this room and across the nation are knocking themselves out to advocate for full-service community schools. Because you know what? Whatever your walk or station in school, the community, or your district, your responsibility today is to consider this message of equity and seek ways to discuss, consider, promote, plan, implement, and sustain it. At the San Francisco Foundation, we have supported over 10 districts in the region to embark on some aspect of planning or implementation of their full-service community schools. And they're doing it without a mandate and without a designated consistent stream of funding. You and your partners are doing it without a mandate and without a consistent stream of funding, and I applaud you for that. But we have some naysayers, and you know who they are. And some of the naysayers are unwilling to consider some of the following results. And these are results that community schools are capturing across the United States. Full-service community schools are seeing improvements in student health, student well-being, student attendance rates, teacher attendance rates, homework completion, basic day-to-day grades, classroom behavior, school climate, verbal and physical violence inside the classroom going down, student and teacher morale going up, and positive parental involvement. And if you have these doubting Thomases who say, well, that's all good, but unless your full-service community schools approach can help raise my reading and math scores, help improve our API, help improve our AYP, then it's just a distraction. I say, really? Really? You have a teacher, an administrator, a school board member, or a community organization leader who diminishes the value of student health, attendance rates, teacher attendance rates, homework completion, basic day-to-day grades, classroom behavior, school climate? Find me that doubter, and I'll show you someone who needs a new job. I said it, that's right. They need to get out of education and stop working with kids. Because anyone who can't see the connection between all of those personal climate and culture improvements doesn't understand how kids learn, doesn't understand how kids grow, and doesn't understand how community is formed in a family, in a group, in a place of work. They need to get out of education. So I'll end with this thought. It's a Latin term. En loco parentis. District folks know exactly what this means. It means in place of the parent, and it refers to the legal responsibility of a person or an organization for a child in place of the child for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, however long they're there. Originally derived from English common law, it allows institutions such as schools to act in the best interest of the students as they see fit, not allowing violations of the students' civil liberties. That's what you're doing. You are ensuring that your school and your district can fulfill the law of en loco parentis and treating every child as they arrive and assessing and addressing the needs and the strengths of that child. And your full-service community school plan will enable your school and your community to implement this. In a moment, you're going to have a real treat. You're going to meet my buddy, Dr. Kathy Gray, who was arguably one of the first associate superintendents for community schools in this nation. In fact, her job description was used to create, in part, job descriptions of similar positions in San Francisco Unified, Oakland Unified, and several other districts. I know this because I was asked behind the scenes when some of these positions that some of you hold were being cultivated, help me find some job descriptions. We're going to go out on thin ice here. We're going to create this position, this coordinator, this director at the district level, but we need something that's been board adopted in another region to show our board. And so that's part of what you're going to get when you talk to Kathy. But before that, I want to leave you with my favorite quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., delivered in 1964 in Oslo, Norway, as part of his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize. And I hope you commit it to memory. I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity and freedom for their spirits. Happy birthday, Dr. King. I turn it back to Dr. Melissa Brown, and let's have a heck of a day.